Hi, my name is Marianne Osher, and I am a retirement coach, educator, and speaker. Welcome back to our video series. We all know some people who just glide easily into retirement and enjoy traveling and playing golf and playing games with their friends, and that's just fine for them. And about 30% of people who retire have that experience. But what about the other 70%? I must say that as a coach, it's heartbreaking to me when I hear people talk about how unhappy they are and how disappointed they are about this time in retirement. In the first video, and if you haven't watched the first video yet, please stop this one and click on video 1 above, because in that video we talked about why this happens to people, why so often people feel lost or discouraged or directionless or unvalued. And so I want you to hear about that first, because the question often is, how long is this time of uncertainty, of confusion? How long does it last? Well, research says typically you go through that unsettling time for anywhere between 6 months and 2 years. But it's different for everybody. Jane Pauley, the journalist, TV journalist and anchor and author of a book called Your Life is Calling, as she talked about her journey through that time of confusion, which she said is like groping in the dark, she said for her it took 4 years. So recognize that whether it's 6 months or 4 years or 5 years, that time of uncomfort does end. And today we are going to talk about what it can look like after you've moved through that time of confusion, that time of unsettlement, that time of uncomfortness into the next phase of your life. You know, I know some of you are skeptical that you'll ever get there, or that you'll ever be able to have the kind of life that you really wanted. I know you see other people, if you haven't retired yet, you see other people in pain, or maybe you're there yourself. Maybe you're in that struggle right now. And so it's hard to see how it could be different, but you don't have to stay in that struggle. You know, Rich is a really good example of that. I've seen he is somebody who moved from definite pain into a great place in his life. I met Rich at a cocktail party, and he was doing what so many people do, hanging on to his past. And I saw that because he introduced himself by telling me what he used to do. And as we started working together, it became very clear that Rich was stuck in the transition that we talked about in video 1. He was depressed. He had difficulty getting up in the morning. And when he did finally get up, he said it took him until 2 or 3 in the afternoon to even do anything. And then at the end of the day, he felt empty. He was suffering. So what we started to do was explore, first of all, his attitudes about retirement. And what we found was that he viewed retirement as being the end of the road, the finish line, that there were no more opportunities, that he was done. And that certainly is very disempowering. But the truth is, it isn't like that, or it certainly doesn't have to be like that. So then we explored, we went through my process, the process I take my clients through, and worked first on him letting go of how he described himself in his career. And then we worked through exploring who Rich is without his business card. Because so many of us, when we're in the midst of our career, tie our identity to what it is that we're doing, what people call us, how they see us in that world, what we believe that we're contributing. That's our view of ourselves. And research, in fact, there's a brand new study that just came out in January of 2016 that was sponsored by Merrill Lynch and AgeWave, which is a real thought leader in this whole area of how retirement is unfolding. And one of the things that they found in that study was that people, as they define themselves in retirement, now define themselves more in terms of what their current interests are, what they enjoy doing, how they're filling their time. And so they have to be comfortable with that definition. And so Rich and I worked through how he wanted to see himself in retirement. And then we focused on his strengths. and his skills, the things that he had done well in the past and that he enjoys doing, whether it's in career or his leisure. And we talked about what really mattered to him. What things in his past did he, when he did them, felt at the end of the day that was important. That made me feel good. It was fulfilling. And then we explored how we could use all of this information. And what happened with Rich is how we moved through this process. That picture that he couldn't see in the beginning began to emerge. And it was a time for him of very much introspection. And that introspection led him to begin to focus on who Rich is now and what it is that he can contribute. And so today, Rich is very re-engaged. Remember in the first video I talked about the study that was actually done by AgeWave in the beginning that identified that now there are 4 phases to retirement. And in the middle is career intermission. And that's where Rich was when he was stuck in his transition. And that's where he was as we moved through the introspection of who Rich he really is and what he wanted out of his life. And then we moved into the 3rd phase of retirement now called re-engagement. And Rich re-engaged. And the way that he did that is as we were going through the exploration of things he enjoyed doing, what he was good at, where his strengths were, he remembered that years ago he had written a short story. And he'd kind of forgotten about that. And so he uncovered it, decided that he really enjoyed writing, took some classes about writing a book, and polished up his short story. Then I said to him one day, okay, what are you going to do with it? He said. He remembered that his daughter had a friend in Hollywood in a very influential role in Universal Studios. So he, with his daughter's help, his manuscript for his short story ended up in her hands. And today Universal Studios is seriously considering making that into a movie. So now he's working on writing it as a screenplay. And in the process, Rich also said, I always thought about writing my memoirs, but who really cares? And as we explored that, he realized that he'd had some very valuable life experiences that were, in addition to being interesting for his children and grandchildren to be able to read, were life lessons that were important to other people. Today, Rich is almost finished with that book. So today, instead of struggling to get out of bed, he is engaged from the time he wakes up. He can't wait to get started on the next chapter of his book or the next thing that he's doing that's regarding all of that, whether it's a class or whether it's writing. He is very re-engaged. But there is no one path to that re-engagement. One of the things that we're learning now is that the retirement path for all of us unfolds based on who we are and what we enjoy. There is no one definition anymore. And it means, so re-engagement means reconnecting with yourself, with your vitality, and with the world as you want to see it. And the ways to re-engage can be being paid or not paid. They can be by connecting with the things that you did in the past that were good at, that you enjoyed doing, and continue on exploring those in a different way. Or it can be doing something entirely different, a big new adventure, something way out of the scope of what you had done before. And I'm an example of that. My story is, I had a 40-year career in corporate America, mostly in marketing and market research. And when just as I was getting ready to retire, I said, I had retired once and not successfully, as I told you in video 1. So what was I going to do the second time? And as I explored that, I said, I really want to help people have the kind of a relationship that my husband and I have, because we have a wonderful relationship. And so that led me down the path of exploring relationship coaching and ultimately retirement coaching. And I must tell you, so it's totally different than anything I'd ever done before. And today I have to tell you that the work I'm doing now is an absolute labor of love. I absolutely love everything I'm doing. And am I working the way I used to work in my corporate job? No way, not anything like that. So it's something I'm enjoying doing. There's more time for my family, and for leisure activities. And so that's an example of doing something that's totally different. So there's no one path. You can continue doing what you already know, or you can be open to exploring new skills, new interests, new activities. Now, some of you I know are looking at retirement. You're looking forward, you're looking ahead at retirement. I can't say forward because I do know that many of you have concerns about what's retirement going to be. And I know some of you just plain enjoy working. You enjoy what you're doing, and you're not so sure you want to stop it. Bert is that kind of a guy. Bert was a very successful entrepreneur, and he loved what he did, but he was conflicted. He said to me, you know, I just can't imagine myself not doing this because I love it so much. He said, but I don't want to miss retirement. He said, I'm finding myself now, a lot of my friends are retired, and so they'll call up in the morning and say, let's go out on the boat today. And I've got a list of clients that I need to see, and I don't have the flexibility of doing that. And I don't like it. I don't want to miss this. So we started exploring, and he, in the beginning, couldn't imagine himself working part-time at what he's currently doing. He saw it as an all-or-nothing game, that in the business that he was in, you're either engaged or you're out. And in part way didn't seem to matter. But once we explored ways that he might be able to have more freedom so that he had the ability to go out on the boat when his friends called that morning, he began to see that there was a way that he could still keep his foot and fingers in what he was enjoying doing and yet have the freedom to have more leisure and more flexibility and more freedom in his life. And so then we started to explore the things that he was afraid of about retirement. And it turned out one of the other things that was holding him back is that he had a big passion for charitable giving in one of the third world countries. And he and his wife had spent a lot of time helping that mission. And he was concerned that the person that was in charge of it was going to suck him into it. And as much as he loved doing it, and as much as he wanted to continue doing it, he didn't want that to consume his whole life. So we talked about how he could set boundaries so that he could still participate, but to the extent that he wanted to. And we figured out ways that he could see how he could do that. And then the core for him was when we started to look at what it was that he really loved about his career. What was it that he didn't want to give up? Didn't take him long to be able to name it. And once he did, we started to look at how could he take that item and apply it in a new way, in new avenues, in new interests. And pretty soon he figured out how he could do that. So today, Bert is living what he says the best of both worlds. He's put into motion the ability to keep his hands and keep involved in what he loved doing, and he has the flexibility and freedom to do some of those things that he wanted to do in retirement. So you've heard about Rich, who moved from the transition where he was depressed and couldn't move forward into having a very full, engaged, enthusiastic life. And you heard about Bert, who was afraid to step into retirement because of all the things we just talked about. But once he could see a way to do it, he was able to put it into action. So my last story is about someone I don't actually know. His name is Gary Maxworthy. And Gary Maxworthy, the reason I'm going to tell you this story is because I think that it's a great illustration of how you can use giving back to find the fulfillment that you know that you want in this life. And Gary retired after 30 years in the food distribution business. And he found that his retirement life was just not very fulfilling. And then his wife passed away, sadly. And then he said, okay, I've got to do something. And he volunteered, he made a year commitment to VISTA. And I didn't know that VISTA stands for Volunteers in Service to America. And it's a national program that's all about stopping poverty. And he ended up from the San Francisco area, and he was assigned to the San Francisco Food Bank. Well, that's a subject that was near and dear to his heart, so that was a good match to start with. And just as we all know, food banks deal with canned goods and packaged goods. And that's all. But Gary also knew something else. He knew that food distributors and ultimately growers turn millions of pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables either into landfills or plow it under or whatever, is destroyed in some way because it's not market worthy. Maybe it's the shape isn't right, or maybe the color isn't right, or maybe it's blemished in some way, but it's still healthy food. It's still the kind of food that people who depend on food banks need to have a balanced diet, need to have a healthy diet. And so Gary set to work to create a system to match the growers with the food bank. And that's certainly called on his understanding of the food industry and some of the knowledge that he had from the past. But then he said, what were the obstacles? And what he learned was that the food banks, and there are a number of them in San Francisco, view each other as competitors. There was the mindset that if that food bank gets something, that means I don't. And then he used another one of his skill as a salesman and as a team builder. And he was able to form a coalition of the food banks in the San Francisco area to work together with bargaining power to connect with the growers and also some of the grocery stores that have to throw away food that is perfectly good because it's not market worthy. And in that case, the food bank was able to buy from the food stores at a very discounted price. The bottom line of all of that is he used his skills. He saw a problem, and he used his skills to create something that's called farm to family. And today, in 2009, Food to Family connected 78 million pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables, and 500,000 people benefit from that every week. So the bottom line of that is, same as the stories of Rich and Bert, is that when you're armed with knowledge and when you have some guidance, you can create a situation where you are feeling fulfilled and where you are thriving. So the point to volunteering is just like what we did with Rich and just like what we did with Bert. When you focus, when you ask yourself, what are my strengths? What knowledge do I have? What are my interests? And who would benefit from them? And then approach that organization more like you're on a job interview. Instead of just walking in and say, hi, I'm here to help, and they don't know what your strengths are or what your contributions could be, and typically they'll have you load a food truck or lick stamps for the next fundraiser. And that might be okay. But what if you approached it by asking them what their problems are, what their issues are, and then see a way that you can match what you do well and what you like doing with how you can help them. It turns out with a very different volunteer experience. I can tell you, I've seen people do that very effectively. So I hope from these three stories that you're taking away hope. Hope that it is possible to move from that time of confusion when you're in pain and you just are disconnected and disillusioned and unvalued. That you can move into a time when retirement is the best time of your life. In the next video, we're going to talk about the path to getting there. I'll tell you about 5 steps that you can use to make your journey to the place that you want to be. And in the end, I have some resources for you to help you get there. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.